Um, right. So, what am I doing? Okay, what's happening? Um, I just spent, the last hour or so just thinking about something that I want to try. I want to try to basically, I'm going to start making my I don't know how to put this, like, doing things in public. Um, See if I can pull that off. Right? So much of what happens, um, to me, it's just all in my head, and um, you know, putting things out um, in public is would be a big challenge. I'm going to see if I can pull it off. Mm. So yeah, and the thing that I'm going to start with is kind of this idea that I have for writing software, or an idea about software, or there's so many different ways to talk about it. Um, and I'm not sure what the definitive way of looking at it is. Um, so, what I thought I would do is break things down into a series of frames, right? Because every time you look at a topic, depending on how you discuss it, you really are framing it in a different way, and those frames sort of are definitive, right? So, in the case of software, one frame is looking at it. I have this idea, and one framing of it is just about history, right? It's about my history of writing software, right? That's what I do for a living. I write software for a living, and I'm as I'm writing it, as I've been doing this work, I've been thinking, how can we do this better? And so that's one way of framing what I'm trying to achieve here is really just going through the history, my history of um, of working, of my work history. Right? I mean, I started out just writing software as a hobby, and then I um, went to university and wrote software for basically solving equations, um, you know, like an academic context. Then started writing software in a business environment, trying to solve that problem. Then I became a freelancer, and now I'm writing software for a newspaper, um, gathering data and creating interactive charts. And so one framing is looking at this in terms of what does software do, and how do we use it, and why, and in that context, how do we make it better? Um, yeah. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, looking at what it is that I'm trying to get to, right? Because I think that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to finish or make progress in what feels like, it always feels like there's something, we're missing something. Like there really is a, um, you know, another, yeah, like a revolution around the corner when it comes to software and what software is and what it's doing and what the fundamentals of it are. Um, does it need to be so difficult? Does it need to be so complicated? Um, uh, you know, there's a lot of specifics that it has to deal with. Like the world is just full of specific things. Um, but I think we may be missing certain fundamentals. There may be a framing, a way of looking at it, and a way of approaching it that would solve a lot of the problems that people have. And I know this is a very, you know, most people I think that write software for a living think about this topic. Um, and there's so many different approaches, and so many people who, and so much, you know, what's the word? A sound and fury. I mean, people who are certain that this is the approach, right? Or this is the approach, or this is the framing. And now I'm sort of just jumping in and saying, "Oh, I know what's going on here," but I don't. I don't know what the answer is. But I just have this persistent suspicion, the sense that there really is something going on here, that, you know, that's, that's, and I actually have a pretty clear idea of what that is. It's I mean, I could lay it out. It's basically, cause and effect and history, right? I think that those are the two things that I think are missing, right? If we just focus on those things, if we focus on cause and effect and focus on historical use, right? Because software is all about repetition. Everything gets used over and over again. Like we break everything down into functions and you use that function over and over again, right? It gets used over and over again. And a function is basically just, some instead of inputs, instead of outputs with side effects. But, my idea, at least in the context of the work that I do, my idea is, look, if I just had a record of every single usage of this function, all the inputs and all the outputs, and I knew, and I could somehow trace, how all the functions were connected to one another, or how everything was connected to each other, it would solve an enormous amount of problems, because then you could just, anytime you're changing any of the code that you write, anytime you just wanted to change something, suddenly realize I don't even know if my audio is working, but like anytime I decided to change a function or a bunch of functions or a bunch of whatever, not only could I see the I could see in the code base, right? Okay, what would this change? Oh, we'll change this over here. We'll change this over here. But add that to the historical tracking of cause and effect, and you get, right. So functions. they get deployed. They get deployed on web servers mostly, or on devices, and so you have all of this usage, and that's that's like the big difference between thinking about software in an academic sense, and then going out into the world and actually trying to solve problems. The big difference is usage. Like, there's people that are using this, and you can never predict what's going to happen, largely because everything is just so complicated. um and that's another thing that I want to talk about, like how do we deal with complexity? Like, people don't really look at it in those terms. Like, everything is just, it's too complicated for us to understand. And I think that's one of the fundamental things that we're trying to deal with all the time, is that your brain, your mind, can only really handle a certain level of, like, cause and effect, and there's this and this does this, and after a while it just becomes too much. So that's why we kind of force everything into these very simple systems, and then we can, at least with those systems, with the constraints, then we can say, okay, well, we know that every part works like this. But again, that's just another framing. I'm not suggesting that's the answer, like that. And that's why I want to break down this discussion, and this my trying to work towards, like, something real, is by breaking it down into, okay, maybe let's talk about this for a sec. Let's talk about this. Maybe it's this. Maybe we should look at it like this. I mean, like, another framing, and that I'm not sure if that's the right word, but another approach to this is just by being very clear and specific about exactly what it is that I want to see, right? Because it's I work. I write software, for a living, and every day I'm trying to solve some problem. Something's wrong, or something needs to change, or we want to build something new. And every day I'm thinking, what would I wish existed? Literally existed right now, that would make my work easier. And so I have a very clear idea, a very specific idea of exactly what I wish existed. I wish that I had a website that I could log into and see precisely what is happening, and see precisely what code changes are doing things and where they're occurring. And to click on a function and then see all of the uses of that function. And it's hard to imagine, because that's kind of impractical, because functions, the number of combinations of function usage are, can go really high. And not only that, but the data going into a function can be massive. So you can't, if you have, like, an array that's coming in, it has a megabyte of data, you can't just snapshot that every time. It's one of the big issues that I don't know how to solve. I don't know how to solve it. But I do have a clear sense of, like, that's what I want. I want to log in and see the whole thing, all the projects, all the functions within the projects. I want to be able to click on a function, and I want to see somehow some kind of statistical or something information about how this thing is actually being used. This function, just this tiny little function, I want to know exactly what are the parameters that typically go into it, and what are the results. What is the result that comes out? Side effects, again, that's another problem. Function could call out, it could do all kinds of things. What do we do about that? But yeah, that's another framing. Um, right. Where am I? Yeah. So right. So this is an attempt. If, just to be vulnerable. I don't know if I should be, but I'm not sure I'm going to upload this. But that is the basic idea. Like I have a sense that this is possible, and that there's this huge, I don't know, maybe it's not huge, but significant shift that can occur. And it's not just something that I think I can build or want to build. Um, and I've also, sort of made steps in this direction. I've built things along these lines, and I've been thinking about this for years. Like this is just sort of what I do. I just am really excited by, I don't know, ideas that are transformative, and approaches, or just an approach that can change. That can, like, how do we do this better, right? Um, yeah. So I'm gonna try to do this in public. I'm going to, pick all these different framings, right? Go through my work history, go through the sort of philosophical way of looking at this, right? My whole philosophy, the idea of that this is all cause and effect, that's what software is. Um, Essentially, we're talking about cause and effect, and if we can just map cause and effect throughout the system and combine that with somehow recording the actual history of every single unit, right? And I think about the neurons, the brain. The one idea I've had is, and it sounds nuts, but I can't think of anything else. Like, how is to actually have every single function have like a neural net trying to figure out like some kind of pattern between the input and the output. But that just sounds crazy. But I can't think of any other way to record in a generic way any function. Because you can't store all the inputs and outputs. It's just too much. It's too big, right? I've got that aspect. I've got the specifics that I want to lay out. Like, this is what I want to happen. You go to the website, on your browser. You log in using GitHub. At the moment, that's, I'm really yeah, and I'm sort of, I don't know if I'm gonna document this, but I'm sort of copying what the Dino people are doing. I hope they don't mind me saying that. With Dino Deploy, I really like their vibe. Very clear vision of what I want to happen. I want to go on the site and click on a function or on a project, and then see each project. There's a lot that is already determined in my head in this regard. Because I'm using a lot of this is for my work. So I'm going to have these deployment bundles that have a bunch of functions inside of them, and then it's just a piece of JavaScript that a website can call, and then it gets a bundle of functions that comes down, and those functions are all connected. I've already have a library that does that. I called it Auto, and it's basically just it's totally based off of a talk by the guy who created MobX. This is all on GitHub. On my tiny project that has like 5 stars. And you can see how much I think about this because if you go deep into the repo, and you'll see there's just hundreds and hundreds of pages of me just, what does this all mean? Um, yeah. So I don't know. So this is, I don't know if I'm going to keep going with this. This is, you know, very self-conscious, but I shouldn't bring my personal life into this. Like, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build in public. I'm trying to lay out my thoughts. I don't know. Accountability, trying to finish things, trying to connect. Yeah. Let's see how this goes.